This is the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom show, the Wake Up Call on WCOM LP, Chapel Hill and Carrboro 103.5 on your FM dial, or live streaming at WCOMFM.org. You can also watch the show on the People's Channel after a week's delay on Thursday night at 10 p.m., Friday morning at 6 a.m., or Tuesday at noon. The show will also be available on our YouTube channel, Wilf Wake Up Call. I'm Iris Schwinzer here with our host, Lori Hoyt, and Emily O'Hara on the camera with the aid of Emily Keel. Today, our special guest is Fran Schindler.
Thanks, Iris. We're all glad to be here on this rainy Wednesday afternoon. We're here every Wednesday, and I hope you're tuning in. We have a really good show today. We have Fran Schindler, who's one of our Wilf sisters. The Wilf being the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, who's our sponsor, and we're so glad that we're all here together. And Fran has a very compelling story, and we had her on, about a year ago?
About a year ago, when I was doing considerable volunteer work with a Choice in Dying organization.
Yes.
I have switched, essentially.
You have switched to dying into the living.
Yes, I have.
And so, obviously, you're a person who likes to do things to help people. And so tell us a little bit what got you started as doing so much volunteer stuff. I understand, if I remember correctly, you're a retired nurse.
Yes, I am. I'm a retired psych and substance abuse nurse from UNC here in Chapel Hill. Most of this started in 1963 when Donald Trump was elected, the very first Women's March. And the term was bandied around about being woke, and I got woke in a big way. And after that, I did considerable protesting and civil disobedience in Washington, D.C.
You took that up with...
since 2016.
Yeah.
Forgetting what year it is. Yes, I did considerable volunteer work in D.C. over those years. And this year, since I am turning 81, I decided to reassess my life. And I had been very interested in things that were happening with the immigration situation, and especially with the migrants themselves. And to that end, in April of last year, I went to El Paso, Texas, and volunteered in a shelter which was supported by Annunciation House, and I spent 3 weeks in that shelter. Now, you have to understand, that was the time when migrants were allowed to cross the border. They crossed, they were put into detention, kept there for however long they decided, then they would let them out, and they would send them to the various shelters around El Paso and other places along the border. So during the time I was there, we would get anywhere between 70 and 80 migrants brought by bus a day. They were fed, housed, given clean clothes and contact with their families, and they then left within 24 hours and went to stay with their sponsors or families. And that continued that work continued until they decided there would be the Migrant Protection Program, which essentially means that nobody is being allowed to cross the border. And that is also going on all along the border of Texas and the United States.
So it's called the Migrant Protection.
That's Migrant Protection Protocols, and it is anything but migrant protection. It is the most inhumane, cruel treatment of people that you can imagine. I learned about that, and because I really felt the work in El Paso was the work of my heart. So I was really looking for where else can I do that kind of work. And that's what led me to Brownsville, Texas, and across the border is Matamoros.
And that was your second trip. You went the first time for 3 weeks last April, and then you went the second time this January.
Yes, to Brownsville and Matamoros. And we are primarily witnessing again at the border and taking a look around. And we witness on both sides of the border. We're standing there where the entrance to the International Bridge is with signs and sometimes chanting and getting the word out. And then everything that we see and observe is then posted on social media so that people can know.
Okay, so we want to back up that there is an actual organization called Witness at the Border.
Yes, and it's a loosely tied up organization, but it began with a man named Joshua Rubin, who went by himself to El Paso and witnessed outside of the child camp in El Paso. They closed that camp and they moved the kids, and we're not sure where they all went. And from there, they opened another camp for kids in Homestead, Florida. So he then went to Homestead. And he spent all kinds of time in Florida until they closed that camp, and still nobody knows where they took the children that were in that camp. There were some younger children and some older children. And once they closed that camp down, he decided to go to Brownsville in Texas and witness there on the U.S. side, and also to go across the bridge into Matamoros and speak with the families that are there. There are 2,500 people, families with children, living in tents in Matamoros. They have actually added another 200 people to that camp. And these people periodically get a court date, and they will go to the court, and the court goes, well, your paperwork is not really complete. You need to come back in a month. So they go back and they sit in the camp for another month. And then they can go back to the court again and not really have any hope of being granted asylum because they need lawyers. They do not have enough lawyers to go around. So the people are actually, as I see, in limbo. They are waiting and hoping to be able to get with their families that are in the United States. And very, very few of them have been allowed. They recently allowed 6 babies that had been born in Mexico. And then they're Mexican citizens. It's against the law to keep the Mexican citizens in that camp. So a lot of calls to the head of the organization that controls the camp.
Wait, say that again. They're not allowed to keep.
They're not allowed to keep Mexican citizens in that camp, and those infants were Mexican citizens. Their parents weren't. The parents came from wherever in Central America, pregnant, delivered their babies in Mexico, in the hospital in Matamoros. So there were 6 babies, some of them sick, and they were not allowing them to cross until a lot of pressure was brought. And through the work of lawyers and various other organizations, those babies were allowed to cross with their parents.
So is this is one of the, you said there was 2,500, and I know there's just so many. Is this just one of the entry parts that in Brownsville, right across the border from Montemoris, is there other parts where there's more people, cause that,
Not right in Matamoros,
No,
all
not
along the
Matamoros,
border,
all along the border.
McAllen, Laredo, all the way up along the Texas border, they are not allowing these people to cross. And the most recent nightmare that I have seen is they are taking people that must be trying to cross and holding them in detention. Then they are taking them to the airport and they're putting them on planes. Swift Air is one of the planes. The witnesses have gone to the airport at 6 o'clock in the morning, looking through the fence, and we see them loading these people onto a plane, and they're taking them either to Guatemala or to Honduras, and they're dumping them out. And they are there with no resources, no family, no nothing. This is genocide. It is the most inhumane, atrocious situation that I can imagine. And the people that are in that camp are the most wonderful, welcoming people, and so resilient and reliant. They are building clay ovens to cook. The whole camp is dirt. It's just on dirt right next to the river. And I observed a man last time I was there. His friend is pouring water into the dirt, making mud. The man is scooping up the mud, and he is building a clay oven, which then they will use to cook on.
it sounds like their dirt is similar to North Carolina, at least part of North Carolina with the clay-like soil. So are most of these people asylum seekers, or some of them are seeking a better economic situation, or are they both?
For whatever reason, they have to come, and they get evaluated on the reasons that they are trying to seek asylum.
Yeah.
And I spoke with one man who came from Honduras. He had been a bus driver in Honduras. He was being extorted. They kept asking for more and more money. When he didn't have anything more to give, then they threatened to kill you. And so he grabbed his family and he left. And he is in the camp. He's this wonderful man that told us this story, and he is supervising the care and cleaning of the pot toilet. I always call them spata pots. Those toilets that they sit around at camp, at
sort of
concerts and all of that.
Mobile.
Yeah, and he is in charge of that, and he takes such pride in his work. And now they have a whole lot of these outdoor toilets. When the camp first started, there were only 3 of these porta potties.
Porta potties. Yeah.
That's the name. There were only 3. They were getting filled up. They were breaking. Sewage is going into the ground, and people are having to go pee and poop by the river. Not so good. They got some donations from somewhere in Mexico and the U.S., and there's a whole string of these porta pots now. They've gotten more money raised by various organizations that now someone comes and sucks them out, cleans them out. And then the people themselves have kind of an assembly line where they go down and clean out the insides of these porta pots. That was unbelievable to me. One person holds the door open, the other person throws the water in, gets a brush, scrubs the toilet seat and the floor, and sweeps it all out. Some of those look cleaner to me than porta pots I've been in this country.
So what you're describing is that these people are very resilient, that they are organizing themselves. They're stuck there in this camp, waiting and hoping for an opportunity to have their case heard. but they're not just sitting there helpless, they're organizing and helping each other, which is so inspiring.
It is. They have organized themselves by country. So Mexican people are kind of in a group, and Honduras and San Salvador, Guatemala, wherever they've come from, and they band together, and some of them have taken on jobs. They elected people, and they divided up jobs so that there is no garbage and trash lying around on the ground in that camp. And people cook, they cook all day long. Somebody's always cooking. One group actually started cooking and made kind of a restaurant. My guess is they must have done that in their country. And they would serve other people in the camp. And so we went by and asked them, will you feed gringos? And they said, absolutely. So we sat down. I'm telling you, the best chicken and rice and coleslaw and beans and the best fried plantains I've ever eaten. And the people that were there at the tent got up. They fixed their table nicely so we could sit down and eat. And we just really felt, I felt, boy, I should give them extra money. I was just going to give them a lot. So I'm counting out some dollar bills, and the man goes, no. And I said, what do we owe you? Puts his fingers up, $3. We gave him $1 tip at least he took, but he was not going to take more than what he thought was the fair price.
Yeah.
For that food. It was an incredible experience. I'm not letting you get a word in edgewise, which is what happens when I start talking.
You don't need to. No, so these people are, I can see where your heart is there. You know, that you can see how they're so resilient, that they're making do. To go down and you see some of these camps and some of these documentaries from different places, and it's all mud and everything. You're talking about people talk about making lemonade out of lemons, going and taking the mud and being so creative to think about making some clay ovens.
Absolutely. They have dug trenches around their camp to make the water flow away when it rains, so that their tents do not get soaked. And I have to tell you a wonderful story, and what it means to me is I really believe in myself. The greatest gift you can give anybody is the gift of a compassionate, non-judgmental presence. You don't have to be a big deal running anything or in charge of stuff. Just show up. So I could show up with I don't speak Spanish. I know some words, but that's all. So I decide I'm going to take drawing paper, and I went to the camp and found some concrete steps, and I sat down on them and tore off a piece of paper. And was a young man sitting next to me, so I handed him a marker and that piece of paper. No conversation. And then I thought, well, maybe he wonders, what am I supposed to do with this? I put my hand down, I drew around my hand, and I made a face in the finger. Oh, he got that right away, and he drew this. And the next thing he says to me, because he could even speak some English, he said, can I draw a picture of you? I said, sure. And he did, and it is a great picture. It looks just like me, glasses and all. And then other adults came, and they took up some crayons and drew, and other kids came. And the young man that was sitting next to me, I discovered was able to use the Google Translator, which I used when I was in El Paso, so I could talk to people, see if they were sick and needed medicine. And he is 22. He is there with his brother. They came from Honduras because his brother was being threatened to be murdered. And I have been worried when I hear they're taking these people and putting them on the planes about these two young men. Because I think, where are they getting these people? I think they're taking them from detention now. They're showing up at the border, and instead of just like trying to put them in a camp, they're sending them back, is what they're doing. They're just sending them back. So I just been worried that I'm going back on Monday, and I gotta make sure that they're, well, I wish they would be there, but I also wish that maybe their court date had come up and that they went to court and could go to their father who lives in Maryland, but I don't know.
So they have a father in Maryland who wants to sponsor them.
Yes, and they still need a lawyer. And you know, one thing in working with people like this that I certainly learned working in psychiatry, to do this kind of work you have to have good boundaries. You can only do much. You cannot involve yourself deeply in trying to save all kinds of people because it's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And you do what you can, and that's all. I don't know what his father's situation is.
No, but this is like for so many that it's so frustrating because, and even with a lot of the children, they have an aunt or a relative here who wants to take them in, and somehow the government's getting in the way of that, and you know, it just is so heartless. I mean, here they are suffering. They're in a country where there's, and one of the things that I don't think a lot of people realize that's impelling so many is that there's drought. And the crops are not doing well where people were able to have their little patch, their little garden, and could kind of keep, you know, body and soul together a bit. And so there's lots of reasons that are creating, and a lot of it, these are climate refugees. That's one
Yes.
factor.
Absolutely, yes they are, and they're the result of other actions that have been taken in these Central American countries by the United States government,
Good.
and it's a crime.
It is a crime because Honduras had a perfectly, it seemed like it was going to be a good guy, and there was a coup that we supported. Zelaya was, and he still tried to get back, and we did everything to keep this little tin pot dictator who was just doing whatever we wanted him to do. So we have dirty hands in this whole situation.
Yes, we do, and they're getting dirtier by the day.
Yeah, yeah.
That is what is so sad.
So yeah, you can't go and fix it, but you're going and witnessing. So this is so interesting. We talked a little bit earlier about there's an older organization, Witness for Peace, which is a different model in terms of how it's, you know, it's going into countries and you have an itinerary. But the whole idea of going and seeing for yourself and then reporting back, whether it's on, you know, the internet or media or to your church or to your newspaper, but you go back and report what you're seeing.
Absolutely, and that is what is so important about witnessing. It goes beyond just standing there holding signs at the border, but being, and I feel that's such a loss because I cannot get everybody's story because I am not fluent in Spanish. But every one of those people that are there has a story, and I'm sure none of them wanted to leave their home, leave the other family members behind. And you know what's interesting that occurred to me on my way back? I thought, I didn't see a lot of old people there. And I think that's it. They could have never made the trip. I talked to a man and his son who came all the way from Congo.
Wow.
By all kinds of ways. Sometimes they catch a ride on a truck. Sometimes they had to march through the jungle. He had a son with him and a wife who was 3 months pregnant. And he was hoping to get papers to be able to cross. I just happened to, I talk to anybody I see most of the time, and we were both sitting by the, one of the office places right near the border, and we just started talking, and I said, like, what are you over here for? And he said, well, I'm trying to find the person that has my papers, because they were supposed to give them to me. And I said, well, you're never gonna find them sitting way down here. Come on with me, let's go up to the door, and there's somebody standing up there. So let's go talk to this guy and ask him, where are your papers? So we went up there, the man and his son and myself, and luckily the man talked to him and just told him the person that had his papers, of course, was not at work, but was supposed to show up later that day or the next day. So I just told him, make sure you come back and come up here, and don't just sit out there waiting for somebody to come after you. You gotta come up here and say, hello, I'm looking for so-and-so, and I need to find out where my papers are.
So when, I want to backtrack a little bit. So when you went the first time, you had this affiliation with Annunciation
Right.
House, which ran several shelters in
Yes.
El Paso. And then the second time, when you went in January for 10 days, you went on your own.
Yes,
But you had made some connection with this Witness at the Border group.
yes, some of the people that have been witnessing down there were part of the group that I joined when I was protesting in DC.
Ah.
Yeah, we were all up there doing civil disobedience when they were trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, and when during the Kavanaugh trial. So I have a whole group of peeps in DC that are there right now, but I just decided, you know, that's okay. There are lots of people there doing that. But I was really pulled to the work at the border, very much so.
More instead, protesting has its place
Yes,
and it's important, but that this was more personal.
yes,
Yeah, and I think that that speaks to your heart a whole lot more.
yes, it
Yeah,
does. Yeah, it really does.
I think we're due for a station break so we can catch your breath. I'll catch my breath, and.
This is Wilf's Wake Up Call on WCOM LP, Chapel Hill and Carrboro, 103.5 FM. You can stream us live at wcomfm.org.
Okay, this is the time for announcements, and the one announcement I'm going to make is about the spoken word, an open mic event at Chapel View Clubhouse on 2701 Homestead Road, and it's inside the leasing office. The important thing is it's a wonderful person, Lauren Butler. She worked with Jackie Shelton Green, helping her promote her poetry and music program. And she's a terrific spoken word poet. And she was at our church when we had a Martin Luther King celebration, she was very impressive. So she's going to be doing her poetry February 7th, which will be Friday. There's going to be a reception at 7, and the program starts at 7:30. There's a cash at the door, $10, $5 for student ID. It's poetry of the heart, spiritual, spiritual profoundness, Lauren Butler and Jelano Bell. So it's terrific. If you've never been to any spoken poetry, that's the way I love poetry the best. It's full of emotion and drama, and it's really great. The other big thing, the very important big thing, is this Saturday is HK on J. Here is, I'm a little hoarse. Can you say a little bit about HK on J?
Oh, I think everybody knows about HK on J. It starts at Shaw University in Raleigh at 10 o'clock and goes up to Fayetteville Street where there will be speakers. including, I think, Reverend William Barber.
Oh, he is gonna be able to be there. Excuse me. Okay. We have it every year, and it's hundreds and thousands of people go, and it's just a wonderful time to remind our legislature. I think we have 14 points still, although we've made some of them a little more explicit, especially about anti-war. Excuse me. So, back to our guests. Is there any other announcement? That's the biggie. HK&J is the big one. Okay, and you're going on Monday.
Yes, and I'm just thinking here, you had asked me about any groups that were working there. And when I wanted to get down there, I did start researching some of the relief groups. There's a very large group called Team Brownsville. And I think lots of large church groups go down and volunteer with them. They cook a lot, and they bring an evening meal over to the camp every night and serve that meal. And they didn't really have any volunteer openings, so I found another group called Angry Tias and Abuelas, which is angry aunties and grandmas. And when I looked at their website, they look like us. They look like all of us in Wilf. You know, I thought, I'm throwing my, stuff with these people. They were great. They responded right away. They, hooked me up with someone locally. I was able to join up with them, go to their shelter or their storage locker in Brownsville. We loaded up 3 or 4 wagons with donations that had gone to them, pulled the wagons across the border, and at the border there are 4 free stores, tiendas, and all the donations go into these free stores. So if people need like Nido, that's that powdered milk a lot of them use for young kids, they can go there, they just ask for it and they give it to them, or Kleenex or diapers, sanitary napkins. Women don't use Tampax over there, so they had a lot of sanitary napkins. I also, and in gratitude to my Wilf sisters who took up a collection for me, was able to donate $100 that I gave to those Angry Tias that they will be able to use to buy more things to take over. I also met a local woman through that group who was going over with individual water filters and giving them to moms with small children. And she's a wonderful woman. She explains this whole thing to them. And they are these Sawyer mini water filters that come with a bag. And with that small filter, and she taught them how you take care of the filter to keep it clean and keep it operating. You can get up to a year's worth of clean water from one filter. So part of what I was doing, I decided to get a PayPal and have some donations come to my PayPal, and then I'm going to buy more of those on Amazon and then just ship them directly to Elisa, who lives in Brownsville. So she took me over with her, so we each carried a few, 5 or 10, in a bag. And so you're not going over the border with a whole lot of stuff, which then the Mexican customs want to look through, and if they think you have too much or you're over the limit, which I think might be $300, but they can say whatever they want, they won't let you bring it in. So we usually, if we're carrying something over, you get 2 or 3 people to just carry, and mostly old ladies. They don't pay too much attention to us. I only have them look at my bag once, and it's your own stuff. And the other thing is, people always want to know what they can donate, but you cannot take used clothing across the border. Anything that you donate or want to buy like that has to have the receipt and the tags on it if it's clothing.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of these organizations.
What do you think the reasoning with that is?
I have no idea.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can only imagine.
Mm-hmm.
But you were also talking about people and their families in the United States, and I remember talking with the one young woman sitting there holding a small child, maybe a year, and she told us that her sister is in Houston. Picture this. Houston is a 40-minute plane ride from Brownsville, and the governor is not allowing any people into his state. It's a crime. That woman could be on a bus and be at her sister's, and people are there. Some people are there 6 months, 9 months, and they go to court, and they just keep getting pushed back. Sorry, we can't do anything for you now. Go back and wait for your next court date. And then they come back and, sorry, we can't do anything. It's frightening, because you think, is this going to turn into a permanent encampment here?
Yeah.
What is going to happen? The other place that I became involved with was the sidewalk school. You can look at the sidewalk school on Facebook. It actually is, school is held on the sidewalk. And the teacher who started it has women who are asylum seekers as the teachers, women and or men that were certified teachers in their own country. They come and teach the various groups at the sidewalk school. And I was also able to give her some money from people that had donated to me before I went down, and she uses that money to pay the teachers. So they have some money. And see, these people that are there are not confined to that tent city, what it is. They can go out and walk down the streets in Matamoros if they want, and go to a store and buy something, fruit or something green, or whatever. I don't think many of them do that. However, they're very scared of crime, and they don't feel safe. They don't even feel totally safe in the camp. They have police at night that patrol around, but the people that we talked to and said, do you feel safe here? They say no, they don't feel safe there.
So some of the people, I'm sure they leave with a little money in their pocket and have some money to try to buy a few supplies, but of course I'm sure they have just so much, so they're trying to make it last as long as they can, so they don't become completely destitute, so they can get some things that they need. But money makes me realize, how are you paying for your,
Well, to go down there,
are you doing this on your own?
yes, to go to Brownsville, yeah, we do that on our own. We pay our own airfare and rent a B&B or a hotel, and you try to get, same way we did in DC, get a whole bunch of people in there to split the cost. But you have to pay your own flight and everything down there and get your own food. As opposed to when I was in El Paso, when you agreed to stay there in a shelter for 2 weeks, they would give you a place to sleep and food. And fortunately, we were in a motel, so we had a room there that we didn't have to pay for. And I liked that so much, I stayed an extra week. But the work there was exhausting. They had us at that first shelter. We worked maybe supposedly 8-hour shifts, but really they were 10 or 12. You couldn't really stay up in your room and think, well, I don't really have to be there to work till 2 o'clock, but you knew there was a bus getting unloaded and they needed help to serve food, so you'd go down there, serve the food to the people, help them get situated, and you would work till 11 o'clock at night. I would on those shifts, and then you're so exhausted you just go upstairs and fall on the bed and go to sleep and do the same thing all over again the next day. That was exhausting. This work in Brownsville is less exhausting than the work in El Paso, where I also, they found out I was a nurse. I don't know, maybe I opened my mouth, but it was pretty loose. They just had a big place where people could come to that clinic, which was in the bathroom. Now this is a hotel, okay? So you got a room. There's a room over here with 2 beds in it and a bathroom, okay? That's a standard, hotel, motel room. Well, the room with the 2 beds is what they call the ropa room. That's where people get a change of clothes. So that room is full of all kinds of supplies and clothes. The bathroom is where the nurse hangs out, or anybody else.
This was El Paso.
In El Paso, yeah. And all the drugs and everything were in there, and then people would come there and line up because they either had flu, gripa, or dolor cabeza, headache, or chapped lips. Everybody had chapped lips from trying to get across that desert. And babies. We had babies that were showing up. Oh, I don't know if you have time, but I'll talk really fast. A lady came, she was pregnant when she started out, this lady, and she had a 2-year-old. She got to Mexico City somehow on a plane. She got off the plane, delivered a baby. Okay, delivered the baby. Out she goes with a newborn baby and a 2-year-old. And she makes her way to the border in El Paso. Okay, thank God these women breastfeed their infants or they die. And so she shows up with this infant. I took one look at her. I was like, oh my God, this looks like a preemie. And the baby was so small. So we did have a doctor we could call. So he came over, he said, this is a full-term infant. I do not know how she made that trick alone. She had to stay at our shelter till the baby was old enough to fly. So she had to stay there, and they kept the baby in the room. So I would go up and babysit the baby in the room while she and the 2-year-old went downstairs to take a break and get something to eat. And they finally managed to be able to fly. But see, all those people in El Paso were being allowed in. They were being processed and on their way to their sponsors. These people now are being left. They say, too bad for you. Go sit in that camp and wait. You cannot come in here. That's a crime.
So since April, the situation has deteriorated.
After April,
so
that situation started going downhill. And Annunciation House bought a huge, like Costco warehouse and gutted it and made it into a shelter that would hold 1,500 people. And the last I heard from somebody down there, they had 100 people in there. And they had cots and everything.
Because
it was
they couldn't
set
get through.
because the people cannot get there. It's enough to break your heart. And once you see it, you cannot look away. And you should not look away.
No.
And it really gives you a kick in your head about, my gosh, I'm moaning about being cold, or I'm moaning about walking in the rain, and these people are in a tent You know, did you ever camp in a tent in the rain? I have. That's not pleasant, but I'm not living in that tent.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
It's a,
this is an inhumane treatment of people that are our brothers and sisters. You know, and it makes you take a look at white privilege. You know, that's how I grew up. I didn't realize I was a privileged white woman until I got hooked up with a lot of people in DC and started paying attention to the fact that there's a lot to be grateful for. And to me, I have an obligation to give back. That's part. And that's why I like Reverend Barber and the Poor People's Campaign, because I will follow him anywhere. He's got the right idea.
yeah,
The system needs to change.
absolutely. Reverend Barber, and I'm going to look at politicians. That's why I really like Bernie. The system has got to change. It's not just Trump. It goes way back.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
overall, it's systemic greed, it's systemic poverty, it's the war, it's ecological devastation, it is everything. The entire system needs to be changed, and
And people just don't want to face it. None of us do. You know, you get comfortable at whatever strata you're living at, but you think, well, you know, I'm not taking that much. But then you look at the statistics, and the developed countries were using so much more of the world's resources than the poorer countries who have a lot more people, and it's you know, our time is coming that we're going to have to face it with the crisis with the climate.
and if people, you know, people always want to know how they can help.
Yes.
And
We do want to get to that. And also, I was just interested, I mean, you've been going down on your own buck. This is your third time. How long are you planning on staying this time?
well, I can stay another 10, I'll probably stay 10 days. I would stay longer, but I have some family commitments that go to the top of my list, so when I can go and stay down there, I will go. But also, when you're having to rent a place, that's, you can't afford to stay there all that long unless you got a whole lot of people kicking in to pay rent. I mean,
Have
you
been
can
able-
eat cheap, but
Have you-
you know, you can't sleep cheap
No.
unless you're gonna sleep in the tent.
Have you been able to find some people to share?
Yes, this time, last time, yes, a friend actually that I met in El Paso. I never knew this woman. She showed up in El Paso after I did. We started talking. Turned out she lives in Raleigh. So we hooked up and went down to Brownsville together. And now this time, I have found two other women that were looking for a place to stay. And so now there are three of us that are gonna
Oh, that's good.
have a place down there.
So is there a need for more volunteers?
I think there is always a need for volunteers, and you can volunteer at Angry Tias and Abuelas if you want to go down, and they have a Facebook page. They're on
Okay,
Facebook.
so
It's Angry TIAS. That means auntie in Spanish.
TIAS.
And Abuela, ABUELA, grandmothers.
Just like us.
Just like us, really.
Angry Tias and Abuelas.
And
that's
the
on
sidewalk school, if people want to donate, they can look, they have a Facebook page. The Witness MPP has a Facebook page. It used to be Witness Tornillo.
So witness and then what, MVP?
MPP, Protection Protocols, Migrant Protection Protocols.
Okay,
They have a page, and they are always in need of help. And most people always want to donate like something.
yeah,
However, the problem with that is getting it down there or getting it to where it needs to go. And really cash is what they need, because then the people can go and buy what they need and then get it across the border.
yeah,
But all the donations that people want, I think, I'm most familiar with Angry Tias and Abuelas, and they have a storage locker. So on their Facebook page, you can find the way to send things to them or donate to them, and then they periodically either take money and go and shop sometimes they go and shop in Matamoros and give the Mexican government their money instead of trying to bring too much over
From
where
America.
you'd end up having to pay tax on it.
so cash is in a way
Cash
the best.
is
It gives-
probably the
It
best.
gives whoever you give it to the most flexibility.
Yes,
Yeah,
to
Got
get
it.
what it is they need.
or we could give you some to take with you.
You could, or I have a Zelly account, and I have now a PayPal account, which I finally learned how to straighten out today. So people can PayPal me at Fran Schindler, or I'm really not sure how. I just know people just go to PayPal, and if you want to donate, you just say PayPal Fran Schindler, or I
Is there any?
give my telephone number.
And this is only Wednesday, so
Yeah.
so the simplest thing for a lot of us would be to give it to you before you leave Monday.
I'm here.
Oh,
That
Monday.
that worked very well, and I am
With the
really
wealth
grateful to all of you, because you did at that last meeting, and I was just able to say, here, this is, from my sisters,
Yeah,
that you can do with this what you need to do.
yeah,
Rather than saying, I want you to do this with what I give you.
yeah.
And I know at the sidewalk school, a lot of that money that I collected before I went down from Wilfers, from just friends of mine, I was able to go to the dollar store and buy 100 of those little stuffed animals. So now every child in the sidewalk school will get one on Valentine's Day. Plus, I don't know, we cleaned out that dollar store, Valentine's stuff and bubbles and everything that we could. And we took some books, we got some books. And I actually met a very special little girl there that, as I was reading a very simple book with her, English, Spanish. So she could read the Spanish and I would read the English, and all of a sudden it dawned on me, this child is way smarter than this. Why has she got this little book? Because it was just a picture of a fish. And English, fish, pesca, I believe, in Spanish. And we did a few more of those, and I finally said to her, as best I could, you are my teacher. Because when I would try to say the Spanish, she would tell me. So I think I learned how to say one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish. So I can read that book in Spanish, and I can say starfish, which I didn't realize in Spanish, like, means a star in the sea. It's Estrella de Mar. And when I go back and say it to her, she'll tell me if I said it wrong. But I think that's what that translates to. It doesn't translate to the Spanish word for fish. So as she's correcting,
It's more poetic.
yeah, as she's correcting me, I'm teaching her for fish, and she's trying to make me say the Spanish sound. So it was wonderful. I mean, it was fun on top of everything else, you know.
Well, it just sounds like you're helping people and you're witnessing and sharing that when you come back with the different organizations now on the radio, on the People's Channel, on YouTube, anywhere that you can get the word out. And have you ever thought about writing even some newspaper articles?
I hate to write, I talk. I'm a big talker, I'm a terrible writer, but I will speak at any churches that want somebody to speak or groups.
Oh, that's good to know.
I will speak. I absolutely abhor having to sit down and write anything.
You know, maybe what you need to do is talk, get on a roll, and then just, record it. And then somebody can people do that, listen to a recording and type it up for you?
And I'm here to tell you, when I come back, I met a woman serendipitously in a store, and she told me her story, and I had her record her story into my phone. I found a friend who is transcribing that and is mailing it to me. And then I'll be able to post it, and I will be able to read. And she is an American citizen now who was abducted at age 15 from a park in Matamoros. And she told me about her journey.
Wow. But that's her story. But you could also tell your witness story of what you've been telling us today. What it's like there, what are some of the good things, like the resilience of the people, all of that good stuff, but also the suffering and the oppression and the uncertainty.
Yes.
And also what our government is doing and not doing to make it better or worse. And you could record that, and this person that transcribes could transcribe that and shoot it off to the Daily Tar Heel, the News and Observer.
Well, you're right. I'll have to look for that.
We've gone over time.
That figures.
Fran, thank you
People
so
have to
much.
cut me
We'll have
off.
you on
Yeah,
again.
you just pushed off.